Pastor Eddie Anderson. I'm a third-generation pastor, serving the historic McCarty Memorial Christian Church located in the West Adams neighborhood of Los Angeles. I'm a member of the Measure J Steering Committee. I got involved in this work to end homelessness because there are too many people who look like me who are forced to live on the streets. And I believe that Jesus was correct, that you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if love looks like tenderness in private, then it definitely looks like justice in public. Measure J is a ballot measure that would amend the LA County Charter to acquire at least 10% of the locally controlled revenue, that's about $1 billion, to be invested into local communities and alternatives to incarceration. Yep, you heard that right. 10% of the locally controlled revenue, which is about $1 billion with a B, to be invested into local communities and alternatives to incarceration. You may think, wow, that's major. So who's behind Measure J? I'm glad you asked. Measure J was sponsored by the Reimagine LA County Coalition. It's a coalition of advocates, community organizations, and neighbors supporting Measure J. To get us started, I would like to introduce a hero of mine, Taina Vargas Edmond. Taina Vargas Edmond founded Initiate Justice in September 2016 with the intention of activating the political power of people directly impacted by mass incarceration. Please put your virtual hands together for a grand round of applause for your neighbor, Taina.
My name is Taina Vargas Edmond, and I'm the founder and executive director of Initiate Justice. I was born and raised in LA County, and all of my family is impacted by incarceration here. My mother, my father, my sister, my brother, and my ex-husband have all served time in LA County Jail. I grew up, like too many children did in Los Angeles County, in poverty and with parents who had alcohol and drug issues. I never got the community services that we actually needed. The only interventions we ever received here were police, prisons, and jails. And that is why I founded Initiate Justice, so that people like me who were impacted by incarceration could have our political power activated and fight to end mass incarceration by passing policies that will bring people home from prison and that will invest in community-based alternatives that actually make us safer. And that is why Initiate Justice and myself are glad to support Measure J. If Measure J were in place, then maybe my sister would not have ended up in jail, and she would have got the mental health services that she needed to resolve her childhood trauma and the trauma that she experienced being a survivor of domestic violence. If Measure J were in place, then maybe my mom wouldn't have overdosed and have been in a coma for the last 5 years. Maybe she would have received the substance abuse treatment and care and love that she truly deserved. If Measure J were in place, then maybe my ex-husband wouldn't have lost his job as a preschool teacher and felt the need to commit a robbery that ended up with him being in prison for 7 years. I am calling on our communities to support Measure J so that less children have to grow up like I did, so that less adults have to be dealing with the mental health implications of the trauma that they have gone through, not just as a child, but as an adult navigating the carceral system. I'm imploring everybody I know to support Measure J because I know firsthand the impacts of what happens when the only care that we have in our communities are the police. So please support Measure J. My name is Taina, and I am your neighbor.
What a powerful way to get our story started. Taina, thank you. Thank you for your courage and for your powerful story. Our next speaker is Grant Sunham. He is the Director of Planning for Little Tokyo Service Center, where he oversees Little Tokyo's creative, placekeeping, community planning, and community organizing efforts. Please welcome your neighbor, Grant Suno.
Thanks for that intro, Pastor Eddie. As Pastor Eddie mentioned, the work that I do is really focused on working within the community of Little Tokyo with a particular emphasis on low-income folks of color and really centered around establishing a vision of the future of our community. We're really focused on answering questions like, what is the Little Tokyo that we want to build for future generations? And what are the values that we want our community to embody? And how are we honoring those who came before us? How are we building a place where future generations can thrive? And how can we ensure that the future Little Tokyo is a place that reflects all of those who would call it home? And really, this includes fourth and fifth generation Japanese Americans, but it also includes children of immigrants from all countries. It includes yellow, black, and brown people alike. And it includes people who are experiencing homelessness. And it especially includes the original Tongva people who called this place home well before any of us did. One of the most exciting things about my job is that it's so varied. On any given day, I'm lucky enough to do organizing work, community planning work, policy work, and coalition work, and partnering with artists, culture bearers, and everyday people alike. We're all working hard to ensure that Little Tokyo and other communities in Los Angeles have the opportunity to determine their own futures and are able to flourish. But why do we do this work? As a parent of two young children, so much of what I do is about building the world that I want my children and their friends to enjoy. I was fortunate enough to grow up as part of a supportive and loving and inclusive community. Some of my earliest memories involve participating in activities at the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center in Little Tokyo, or attending the Nisei Week Festival. And I want that for my kids too. And actually for my daughter, one of the hardest adjustments for her in terms of changing from pre-pandemic life is, not being able to attend preschool at the Buddhist temple in Little Tokyo. So on a daily basis, I and many other folks in Little Tokyo and ethnic enclaves around the city fight for the future of our communities so that our kids may have the same opportunity to be in community as they grow up. And ultimately, that's why Measure J is so beautiful and important, because as a piece of policy, it's really an opportunity to build a world that reflects our values. It's about creating a society that values true public safety, the rights of the marginalized, and community investment over incarceration and criminalization. It's about creating a society that puts into practice the values of generations of struggle for civil rights and justice. And it's about making a statement that future generations can be proud of and showing our commitment to those values in a concrete and tangible way. For all these reasons, I'm voting yes on Measure J, and I hope you will too. And I hope you'll tell your neighbors and your family and your friends to do the same, because we're all neighbors, and neighbors really must care for and uplift each other. My name is Grant Suno, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Grant, for your story. What really stuck out to me about Grant's story was his passion for his kids and his willingness to fight and ensure that they grow up in a community that vibrates with their culture. And doesn't all of us want to live in a community where our kids can see their culture translated, where they can see themselves reflected, where they can be truly included in the decisions that will determine their future? Well, Grant, thank you for doing your work. Our next speaker today is Carla DePaz. Carla is a justice warrior, a community advocate, and somebody who I have personally been on the streets with. She is the Director of Organizing for the Community Power Collective. Please put your fingers and snaps together and welcome this justice warrior from the front lines, Carla.
Hola, I'm Carla de Paz. I'm a founder and the project director of the Community Power Collective, a small grassroots organization building power with tenants and workers in the informal economy, most notably the amazing street vendors in LA as part of the LA Street Vendor Campaign. I'm also the daughter of an immigrant single mother from Guatemala who planted roots in Linwood, California, which is where I still live today and from where I'm sending this message. I had a very humble upbringing, like many immigrant families do. My extended family squeezed into small living spaces in order to make ends meet. I slept in living room floors most of my childhood, not understanding that what I was experiencing was housing insecurity. I'm grateful that my family made the best out of unfortunate circumstances, finding solutions to our problems by building a sense of community, encouraging as much joy as possible, but also instilling a sense of collective responsibility and curiosity as to why we had to live our lives this way. And this humble but joyful upbringing shaped the path that I'm on today. For the past 7 years, I've been organizing to win housing rights for tenants and organizing for the working rights of street vendors. And LA loves its street vendors. But many didn't know that until 2019, it was illegal to vend on LA City and county sidewalks. And not only was it illegal, it was actually a criminal offense. Street vendors could get arrested and even deported if they were undocumented for vending on sidewalks. Street vendors are hardworking people with many different identities. They are tenants, they are immigrants, elderly, formerly incarcerated, people of color, women. Some of them are houseless, and most of them have a story to tell you about their encounters with law enforcement. I've heard many heartbreaking stories of mothers selling flowers with their children getting tackled to the ground by police. Stories of fathers and grandfathers who have been selling elotes or tacos for 20 plus years, getting arrested by the sheriffs and then being put in deportation proceedings. You hear these stories in the late night news and it makes no sense. I have a lot of people ask me why are hardworking people getting treated like criminals for just trying to make a living? And the answer is that our city and county for far too long have addressed issues of public space and economic development from an outdated and racist perspective that policing is the only approach to safety. And this is why the Street Vendor Campaign fought back, and we won. Street vending is no longer a criminal offense across the entire state of California. Merchandise vendors can get their permits now in the city of LA and very soon in the county. And before the pandemic, we were on our way to innovate the street food cart industry so that food vendors have an easier pathway to selling food legally on the street. But with COVID-19, street vendors find themselves out of work, late on rent, being harassed by a landlord, facing eviction, or already living in their car. Our municipal leaders have failed to keep people housed. And the folks that I work with have no choice but to vend on the streets in order to make some money. And food vendors in particular, are finding themselves now facing criminal citations again because they don't have the right equipment to vend under health department laws, which are now being strictly enforced. There is no investment in helping them do their work legally. The only solution offered is more and more enforcement. For example, after legalizing street vending in the city of LA, they only invested $300K for outreach and education and $6 million for enforcement. We can't have the same thing happen in the county. I believe we need a fundamental shift to how we approach economic development, public space, housing, jobs, and that is why I support Measure J. Street vendors care about public health. They want to do their work legally. They deserve investment in their work. They deserve housing. Their children deserve more than sleeping on living room floors. They deserve safe housing, and they deserve to live free from the fear of police. And the entire LA Street Vendor Campaign family is excited to support this measure. We believe it will align our county's budget closer to the real needs of our community. I'm excited to imagine the opportunities that these funds can bring to the people I work with. I think it's time to reimagine safety. I think we need to move away from policing and incarceration and create real investment in community development, a real investment in jobs, a restorative approach to issues of public space and public safety. I think it's time to invest in street vendors and not police. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Carla de Paz, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you for being a fighter. Thank you for the work that you are doing and sharing your story. All of Los Angeles is grateful for the work you've done, especially with the street vendors campaign and legalizing street vendors. She was no joke in that campaign, and we thank you for taking the time to share your story with us on today. Now, let's hear a little bit more from the experts about what Measure J will accomplish. I'm honored to welcome Mike Dennis. Mike is the Director of Organizing for United Way's Everyone In campaign. Mike, will you please tell us a bit about yourself and your work as an organizer with Everyone In?
Hey everybody, my name's Mike. I'm the organizing director with the Everyone In campaign at the United Way of Greater LA. I'm out here in the streets with my team every day working across the county to try to build as much supportive and affordable housing as possible. We're in the middle of one of the worst housing crises our state's ever faced. We have an explosion in homelessness, and we need solutions that are going to permanently address those issues. And so, when I think about why I got into this work, my mom, I can look no further than her and her experience. Her and her family came here to this country when she was a young person. She had to endure a lot of prejudice and racism, and I try to honor her efforts and her labor through my community organizing work. I've spent the last 10 years to 15 years working as a community organizer here in LA on housing and economic justice issues. When we're talking about homelessness, I think we tend to view homelessness as a singular monolithic issue, but in fact it's actually one of the most intersectional challenges that we're facing. It sort of traverses housing justice, economic development, access to jobs, criminal justice reform, racism, sexism, gender justice, and people that are living out in the streets are sort of living in the intersection of all of those things colliding together on a daily basis. They're experiencing that sexism, they're experiencing that racism. And I think if we want to permanently address homelessness, we can't only put people in permanent housing, we've got to give them the services that are going to make sure they get back on their feet. And we've got to stop the cycle of poverty where we criminalize people and put them in jail and trap them, right? And so that's why I'm really excited to talk about Measure J. Measure J is a huge opportunity for LA County to sort of address all of these colliding issues at the same time. We know, and we've operated with the collective understanding, and Measure J acknowledges that the status quo is not public safety. The status quo is not healing communities. The status quo is not ending homelessness. We've got to really think hard and do things differently. Measure J is going to permanently enshrine our values in our county budget. It's going to finally fund the services that we know work but continue to go unfunded year after year. And so that's why I'm really excited about this opportunity. That's why my team, the United Way, we're all in on this. We want Measure J to pass. We need this type of visionary policymaking that's going to get people back on their feet. It's going to end state-sponsored violence once and for all. And it's going to begin to reverse a 400-year trend in this country. And that's why I hope that you all vote yes on Measure J and talk to everybody you can too. My name's Mike, and I'm your neighbor.
Thanks, Mike. Communities are created through strong connection, and thank you for reminding us that we can say yes in our backyard. Yes, everyone deserves to be in, and yes, we all can be little angelic troublemakers that bring the transformative change we need. Thank you for connecting us to one another through your work. And one way that we stay connected is through art. Art in all its forms is a universal connector. It crosses boundaries, tells stories, and brings people together. When you hear a good song, it does not matter who's around you. It just matters if they are on the same vibe and wavelength with you. That's why Everyone In Stories from the Frontline always include some form of music or poetry to liven up our spirits and to remind us that we can all be in this together. I am thrilled to welcome to the stage Plug World.
So where you gonna run to? So where you gonna run to? Cinnamon. So where you gonna run to? So where you gonna run to? And what are you gonna do? Ooh, when Jesus comes, when he comes. To the rock, run to the rock, so there's no hiding place, but the rock won't hide, but the rock won't hide your weary face, so what you gonna do, what you gonna do? Jesus comes, when he comes, what are you gonna do? When Jesus comes, where you gonna run to? Where you gonna run to?
Yeah. Sin a man, forget a man, run to the right. Deliverance, why choose a fight? What's in his plans? He died so you can live with him. Love with no conditions in. Listen, man, really, where in the world you gon' hide when it's in his hands? How you tryna hide your face from the one who made it? How you gon' hide when he's where you're hiding places? Who you think you playing? Oh, that rock ain't no replacement for the rock of salvation. It's kinda outrageous. So start running to your reservation, or you already know the destination.
Where are you gonna run? Sinner man, where you gonna run to?
I don't know about you, but I was vibing to Plug World. Y'all ought to go and follow them on Instagram and download their latest hit. It is totally a vibe. Thank you for lifting up our spirits with your art. Our next speaker is Brian Taina. Brian is the Los Angeles coordinator for the California United for Responsible Budget, aka CURB. He also serves on the Measure J steering committee. Please welcome your neighbor, Brian.
I was 16 years old the first time I was handcuffed and thrown face down onto the hood of a police car. I hadn't done anything wrong except for walking while black and queer in my own neighborhood. And I suppose I got lucky I didn't go to jail or get shot. But I remember being so angry that luck should ever be such a decisive factor in anyone's survival. I think a compassionate society is built on equity, not luck. And to achieve equality for all, we must advocate for policy changes that uplift people who are at the most vulnerable intersections of race, gender, class, and ability. Measure J is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do just that. My family struggled desperately with housing insecurity, mental illness. I was debilitated by depression growing up. What I remember most is looking for help for my family and being completely unable to find it. Now, I worked hard to change my life trajectory, and mostly I got incredibly lucky. I found an amazing community. I found a dream job. I sort of hit all the metrics of success, and yet I felt totally empty. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, and it was really scary, mostly because it didn't happen until my 30s, because mental health treatment was so hard to come by. Before I started taking the right medication, I had a lot of dark weeks that stretched into dark months. And finding a way to be useful in my community really helped me navigate my own mental health. It was a tool of survival for me. I wanted to work with people who struggled with the same things I did. Mental health challenges, substance use, poverty, being black or brown in a world like this, being queer. My intention was to, in some way, alleviate suffering. And the places where I found suffering in its worst forms over and over again was in the lives of people who had been harmed by prisons and jails, many of whom needed to be in drug or mental health treatment, not behind bars. The United States incarcerates more people than anyone in the world. LA County is home to one of the largest jail systems in the world. And here in LA, the jail called Twin Towers is in fact holding more people suffering from mental illnesses than any other psychiatric hospital in the country. Despite all of these reforms we've made, things keep getting worse, and we must demand transformative change. What we've been doing is not enough. I've spent the past 7 years monitoring, challenging, and exposing the abusive conditions inside of California's prisons and jails. The people I've met and the stories I've heard have changed the course of my life. They've healed me, and they've led me to where I am today. My name is Brian Kaneda, and I'm the LA coordinator of CURB, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you for your courage, my brother, for showing us intersectionality of race, of class, and of mental health, and what is possible when we actually have resources. That's why Measure J is so important. It makes sure that your zip code does not determine what resources you get, that your color does not determine what resources you get, that everybody deserves mental health. Everybody deserves access to pathways that will make them whole and well. And Brian's story really, really brings that home. Thank you for your courage. Our next speaker is Jenny Dalewood. She is the Executive Vice President at Liberty Hill Foundation. She also serves on the Measure J Steering Committee. Please welcome your neighbor from the Liberty Hill Foundation, Jenny.
Hi there, my name is Jenny, and I am your neighbor. I support Measure J because it's personal. Growing up, I had two fabulous parents, my mom, a teacher, and my dad, a Marine. We had our basic needs met, yet we did struggle. My mom had a mental illness, and that often resulted in a roller coaster of emotions. One day, the police would be showing up at our door because my parents were fighting so much that they called the police on one another. And the next day, we'd be at a shopping mall spending way more money than we ever had. This roller coaster was just my life as a child, and I got used to it. But we had resources. We had access to health care. We had a roof over our head. And not everybody is as lucky. Fast forward 2 decades, and my wife and I became foster parents just this past year. Our first foster daughter, we'll call her Little J, brought a tremendous amount of joy into our household. We loved making slime with her, creating robots out of boxes, dancing to all kinds of music. But Little J had a lot of pain, and she had gone through quite a bit for a 7-year-old. She and her mom had lived in and out of motel rooms for the year prior to coming to live with us. She also experienced abuse in foster care before living with us. Unfortunately, little Jay's mom suffered from mental illness just like my mom, but she didn't have the access to housing resources, to healthcare resources. She didn't have a job that she could rely upon. And her experience was much different than my own. I wish that little Jay didn't have to come live with us, that she and her mom got the services that they deserved, and that they didn't have to be separated from one another for month after month after month. Measure J is designed to change this. It's designed to ensure that every family has access to career training, to the right healthcare services, to affordable housing, and restorative justice. I support Measure J because I want all the kids and all the families across Los Angeles County to have the services that they need to thrive. No longer should it be only those at a certain income level or with a certain color of skin getting access to the services that are basic necessities. Please vote yes on Measure J in the coming days so that we can ensure that more families and all families ultimately have the services that they need to stay out of systems of oppression and have the opportunity to thrive. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Jenny Delwood, and I am your neighbor.
Jenny, thank you so much for your story and for your advocacy and for all that you and Liberty Hill Foundation do to make sure that our voices are magnified and that our power is always seen and heard, no matter what we are fighting for. Now I get to introduce one of my favorite human beings in all of Los Angeles, Yvette Ale. Yvette is a Latinx grassroots organizer and advocate leading campaigns to reform the criminal legal system in California. I invite you to lean in and learn from a justice warrior and policy master, Yvette.
My name is Yvette Ale, and I am the Senior Policy Lead at Dignity Empower Now and the coordinator of the Justice LA Coalition. Dignity Empower Now is a grassroots organization that fights for the dignity and power of individuals, families, and communities that are impacted by incarceration and policing. Justice LA is a coalition of over 50 organizations that works to stop jail expansion in LA County. And just last year, we successfully stopped LA County's $3.5 billion jail plan. And this year, we, alongside many community-based organizations and community members, successfully moved the LA County Board of Supervisors to adopt the Alternatives to Incarceration Roadmap, a report with over 100 recommendations for the county to shift spending and shift priorities away from incarceration and towards community-based care. Families like mine, who have been impacted by criminalization and incarceration, know all too well the devastating effects of punitive responses to harm. My parent was incarcerated in jail, in prison, and in a deportation center throughout my whole life. As a result, my family became houseless, and because we were undocumented, we were unable to receive basic care, like housing, like mental health care, like trauma support, and well-paying jobs. What my family needed was care, not the incarceration of our loved one. What our loved one needed was substance use treatment and mental health care, not incarceration. Families like mine know that what actually keeps our community safe is care, not cages. What actually keeps our communities healthy, and thriving. It's housing, mental health treatment, good paying jobs, which is why over the last 15 years, I have dedicated my life to organizing and advocating for a different model, a different way of supporting our communities that does not rely on criminalization and incarceration. I've had the privilege to organize alongside powerful community-based organizations led by Black, brown, queer, and system-impacted people to transform our county into a place of health, of safety, and into a county that prioritizes our needs, which is why I was thrilled to support Measure J and to help lead Measure J to a victory in November. Measure J exemplifies everything our communities have been asking for, demanding for generations. Investment into well-paying jobs in our communities, supporting Black and brown owned small businesses, supporting youth development so that young people are able to stop cycles of incarceration, supporting mental health needs and behavioral health needs, drug treatment, so that families like mine can receive the health and the care that they need. Measure J is setting a new precedent for not just LA County, but for the rest of the country that says we will prioritize people over caging. We will prioritize families over policing. We will prioritize the health of our communities over incarceration, which is why I support Measure J, and I hope that you will too, because we have the opportunity to transform our communities with Measure J and build on the generations of hard work that has been led by people impacted by criminalization and incarceration. Black and brown people, immigrant people, queer people, people with mental health needs, people with disabilities, people that have been at the forefront of this work for transformative change, that have been laying their lives on the line so that we can collectively build a better future for our communities, for our families, for our young people. My name is Yvette, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Yvette, for your story. Thank you for your courage. And thank you for your leadership. I know that we can truly win Measure J, and we can truly win any fight if you are part of leadership, and I will gladly fight with you and beside you no matter when you call, because I know freedom and liberation is on the other end of every fight that you're a part of. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and letting us know the importance of Measure J, not only for the Black community, but the brown community and all of us who are facing oppression and marginalization, but will refuse to be silent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. And now I am honored to introduce to you someone who needs no introduction. Our final speaker for today is Elise Buick, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. Please join me with a grand round of applause in welcoming your neighbor, Elise Buick.
Hi, my name is Elise Buick. I'm the President and CEO of United Way of Greater Los Angeles. I want to thank you for joining us at this special edition of Stories from the Frontline. Today, we are asking you to join us in voting yes on Measure J. Measure J is a history-making measure that will allow us to dedicate at least 10% of the county's unrestricted money for racial justice, alternatives to incarceration, and housing justice priorities. We know that too often our interventions happen after someone hits a crisis, as you've heard today. We're treating people that are suffering from mental illness with incarceration. We're trying to service them in jails, and we know this is not what they deserve. These investments allow us to move upstream to really invest and help people before they hit crisis, ensuring that they have more access to mental health care, to youth development programs instead of incarceration, to housing development, housing vouchers to keep people safe and housed, and really investing in communities and small businesses that are owned by Black and Brown leaders to really allow people to ensure that they have the dignity and the resources to thrive as individuals and in their communities. So I hope that you will join us in saying yes on Measure J. If we can get this passed in LA County, I truly think that this is a measure that we can replicate all across the country and really give communities what they are asking for, public budgets that reflect our values and address decades of disinvestment and systemic racism by not putting Black and Brown communities first. So vote yes on J. Please help us get the word out and do what you can to get it over the finish line. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Elise, and I am your neighbor.
Thank you, Elise, for your work and for making sure that LA is truly a county that has a moral imagination where everyone can really be included in, and where all angels can fly, and when we see oppression, to be angelic troublemakers and transform the system. That's what Measure J is all about. So many people came together to make this afternoon possible, and for that, we are truly, truly grateful. So thank you to everyone who shared such powerful stories. I want to specifically thank our partners across LA County who are working head on to end homelessness. Thank you to Dignity and Power Now, Little Tokyo Service Center, Community Power Collective, Californians United for a Responsible Budget, the Liberty Hill Foundation, Initiate Justice, our musical guest, Plug World. Please go follow them on Instagram. The John and Marilyn Wells Foundation. We truly have to create a Los Angeles where everyone is in. And beloved, we have the power. We have the imagination, and we have our voice in our vote. So you know what to do. Vote yes on Measure J and say we deserve justice. Vote yes on Measure J and say Black Lives Matter, and it starts with an allocation of 10%. Vote yes on Measure J and bring Jubilee to all of those who are forced to live in the dark nights of homelessness and oppression in our county, and say that we see you, we hear you, and our values say that you deserve to be in and to be cared for and to be made whole. Measure J does just that. So vote yes on Measure J for jobs, vote yes on Measure J for healthcare, vote yes on Measure J for justice. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you the next time around. Until next time, I'm Pastor Eddie Anderson, the proud pastor of McCarty Moore Christian Church, member of LA Voice on the steering committee of Measure J. But most importantly, I am your neighbor.